So,
Okay,
Carey, go ahead and introduce yourself and what are the two recent books you've written and what is your main passion in the line of work that you do?
sure. My name is Carey Gillam. I'm an investigative author and journalist. I've written a couple of books about the pesticide industry that mostly focus on Monsanto and its glyphosate weed killer and the regulatory world surrounding that chemical and all the controversies with its association to cancer and other health impacts. I'm very passionate about, obviously what I do. I've been doing this for 30 some, more than 30 some years. I just really think it's important for people to understand the environmental and health impacts of all of these chemicals that we are using so prevalently in our world today.
Thank you for that introduction. And it reminded me of how I got in touch with you. So, Diane Rosenberg is with the group named JFAN. A lot of people here in the state know about Diane and her work with CAFOs. But she told me how much she is loving your book, The Monsanto Papers. She said she cannot put it down. And so that's when I was like, well, I'll look this person up. And then I looked you up, I sent you an email, and you amazingly agreed to do this short interview, which I really appreciate. And I'm super fascinated that you have committed so much time to these topics because I feel like it's kind of hard to find people that have really focused on these things, actually. I mean, you might know tons of people, but I don't yet. So since we do have a limited amount of time, I wanted to focus on, um, well, actually, I'm just going to give you a tiny bit of backstory. So here's what happens in the state of Iowa. Prairie restorationists, it is very common for prairie restorationists, from what I have heard, and I've traveled around the state for the last year interviewing prairie restorationists. I will say 8 out of 10 prairie restorationists that I meet, when they come across a lawn or a field and they want to convert it to restored prairie, the first thing they do is they kill everything with glyphosate. And that shocked me because these people are hardcore conservationists and environmentalists. But when I would ask, why are you using glyphosate? They'd be like, oh, this is a different formulation. It's safe. It doesn't affect wildlife. I've done the research. It's fine. Now, I know that's not okay and it's not safe, but I wanted to talk to someone who's done more homework than I have. Is there any documented evidence, any stories you can think of that show a link where you would want to think twice about using glyphosate?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, there are many, and I've written two books about all of the reasons, obviously. Um, Glyphosate, in comparison to other weed killing chemicals that have been used in agriculture and residential and commercial use, uh, it does compare a more acutely safe level in many respects, particularly if you compare it to paraquat, which was introduced in the 1960s, and then glyphosate came around in the 1970s. Paraquat will kill you pretty quickly if you
Wow.
absorb or ingest a very tiny amount of it. Glyphosate
Wow.
in comparison won't do that.
Okay.
It was presented by Monsanto to the world as, profoundly safe for people and pets, right? Um,
Right.
what we came to understand over many, many years is as glyphosate use increased, and it became the most widely used weed killer in the world, scientists started really digging in to study the impacts on health and on the environment. At the same time, glyphosate use continues to rise. So we have a twofold problem, really. We have prevalence. It has become ubiquitous in the environment. You have glyphosate found even in rainfall, our government researchers have found. Commonly found in rivers and streams. It's found in the soil. It's found in air samples. It's found in the food that we
Whoa.
eat. It's found in the urine that we excrete from our bodies. It's found in blood serums. So it's this prevalence is a real problem, this overuse of glyphosate
Huh.
that was pushed primarily because Monsanto told us it was so safe. And at the same time, you have researchers who have documented associations with an array of health problems, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma, reproductive health problems, gut changes that are very unhealthy. Um, all of these different impacts that people can experience through exposure to glyphosate. And certainly we have, environmental impacts as well that have been documented on a range of different species, and biodiversity, important pollinators. Weeds have become resistant to glyphosate because it's been used so much. So,
Mm,
so many more people are now using, farmers in particular, are using other pesticides on top of glyphosate. So it really did spur kind of this vicious cycle of pesticide overuse. And, we're seeing some of that play out in Iowa and other places as people become more and more concerned about rising cancer rates, fertility concerns,
mhm.
and other health problems.
Yeah, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I feel like I hear that so often here with people I meet in Iowa. It's so common.
Right.
Well, I guess the big question I have, and I know this isn't necessarily a scientifically based question, but why is there still such a pervasive impression that glyphosate is the safe chemical to use?
Well, there's one of the judges was quoted, well, a federal judge was quoted a few years ago and looking at this, who oversaw these thousands of people who had sued Monsanto,
Hmm.
blaming them for non-Hodgkin lymphoma that they alleged came from their exposure to glyphosate products. The judge said, it looks like Monsanto cared, I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but
Yep.
Monsanto cared a lot more about protecting the sales of glyphosate than it did about the health of its customers. And what we've seen play out through this litigation, we've gotten access to thousands and thousands of pages of internal Monsanto documents and records. That's
Oh,
a
wow.
large part of my second book, my book called The Monsanto Papers. These internal files show us that Monsanto spent millions and millions of dollars to create this false message of safety and, to shoot down anyone, scientists, academics, journalists, anyone, lawmakers who were raising a red flag or pointing to evidence of harm. They ghost wrote scientific studies. They talk internally about taking pride in ghostwriting scientific studies to confuse the public, to confuse regulators. They talk about undue influence that they had inside the EPA and other regulatory agencies to keep
Wow.
glyphosate designated as safe. It was a very well-financed, very strategic, long-term plan that played out over many decades to downplay all of these risks that we see in the scientific evidence.
So where are we at today? We have 10 minutes left. Where are we at today in terms of sort of this trajectory of the creators of glyphosate, the people who still sell it, versus public awareness? Or do you think that things are going to head towards more litigation and lawsuits, or will they be pulling their product because now sort of the cat's out of the bag that it's not as safe as they say?
Well, certainly, I mean, the executives at Monsanto, were smart enough to take the money and run, so to speak, in 2018, with all of these thousands of lawsuits coming down around them and the evidence sort of getting harder and harder to, sweep under the carpet. They sold the company to the German conglomerate Bayer. Bayer closed on the company just as the very first trial was starting to take place, and then Bayer's share prices plummeted when the very first verdict came down in August of 2018. And so ever since then, Bayer has been trying to dig itself out of this glyphosate hole. They've recently put the glyphosate products into a separate subsidiary. They've threatened to take the whole product line into bankruptcy. They are trying to settle the litigation. They've put a $7.25 billion settlement out there to try to put an end to it. And they have removed glyphosate from products that they sell to residential users, people who would spray it around their garden or lawns. But they're continuing to fight to keep it in agriculture, which is a very big use for it, and it's where it gets into our water and our food and our bodies. So we'll see. The Make America Healthy Again movement has been, calling for an end, a ban to glyphosate in agricultural uses. It's been a big part of their platform. The Trump administration has said, no, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to encourage more production and use of glyphosate.
Was actually that does me lead me to a question I wasn't planning on asking, and you can just swat it away if it's we can edit it out. But so here in Iowa, I've sort of stumbled into this overspray issue and chemical drift issue. Literally on July 16th is when I finally started asking questions just on a whim because I didn't know it was such a big issue. But most of the people that I've heard from, and it's literally been hundreds of Iowans have reached out to me and said that this is the worst spray year that they've ever seen in terms of frequency of spray, of applications. And they're just like, what is going on? And a lot of people have theorized that it is because of Trump's recent um, changes, policy changes, where they've sort of lifted restrictions on how much you can apply, frequency of applications. Is there any veracity to that? Or is that
Well,
just guessing? Like, did
Trump,
Trump actually lift
no,
limitations at all?
no.
Okay.
Trump's executive order was sort of this sweeping, order narrative that we need glyphosate and we're going to protect it from liability, and we want to encourage production in the
Oh,
United
okay.
States so that we don't rely on China for our glyphosate, that kind of thing. Um, I think overuse or overspray might, I mean, I don't know, but I would guess it might be related to, weather conditions, weed proliferance, a need to really fight back those weeds that have become more resistant. It growing conditions have a big impact, right, on farmer choices
Yeah,
for inputs, and farmers typically don't want to add more inputs because they have to pay for every penny that they're spraying, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it just takes away from their margin. So I can't say what's going on there, but certainly the Trump administration has made a point of sending a signal that they don't want to see an end to glyphosate anytime soon.
Okay. I have six. I'm sorry. I like to be really punctual, so I have six
Oh,
minutes and 20 seconds left. Let's jump over to atrazine because you had mentioned atrazine is also a commonly used chemical. What's sort of how would you describe the difference between atrazine and glyphosate?
atrazine's another, weed killing chemical, very, very commonly used in corn, very, big in Iowa. Obviously, atrazine is a product that has largely been, brought to us and pushed by a company called Syngenta, which
Oh,
is
okay.
owned by the Chinese government. Wasn't always. It's been a series of companies, but
Wow.
primarily was in Switzerland, but is owned by
Wait,
China.
hold on. The Chinese government owns the chemical company that sells atrazine, and that's just really wild that,
And the most of the production of glyphosate, a big competitor now is China for selling generic glyphosate. And
wow,
paraquat is largely produced in China.
okay,
China's a big producer of paraquat.
wow.
Um, China's big into selling us pesticides, that's for sure. Anyway,
Was
atrazine has been shown, again, to be harmful to human health. There's real reproductive concerns, endocrine disrupting concerns, affect the hormone changes. Scientists have really seen impacts in amphibians, because it's quite commonly found in our water. It runs off into streams and water supply, drinking water
wow.
supplies. So atrazine is a real concern as well. And again, you see a lot of use of it, in corn, and soybean growing states like Iowa and elsewhere. It's one of many, commonly used pesticides that people really become concerned about because as we study them more and we find more impacts on human health, people are growing more and more worried, but our regulators are doing very little to change
Sort of like
or to restrict
it's
it.
sort of, I feel like, excuse me, it's sort of like an inverse proportion. The worry of the everyday citizen goes up, and then the regulation is going the other direction. I'm
It
doing this
really
wrong,
is, and
but
what you've seen and what I've been able to document in the books, and other people certainly have. I mean, I'm not the only one, but when you look really deeply into this, you see just really deeply entrenched influence that these companies have on our regulators, the
yeah,
EPA, but also on the administration and certainly on lawmakers. I mean, crop life and the agricultural industry is one of the biggest. They spend a very large amount of money in Washington, D.C. on lobbying efforts every year. They're
Hmm.
along there with oil and gas and other very powerful industries who are.
That had not occurred to me that there would be like chemical company lobbyists lobbying to keep the chemicals in. I don't know. I just never thought about that. Yeah.
It's huge. It's enormous, and it really affects public policy. It keeps different subsidies in play that keep farmers growing corn, for instance, so that they can keep
Okay.
spraying atrazine. It keeps, all of these other different row crops. We have all of these incentives that our government gives to
Oh, of
farmers
course,
to plan.
because if a farmer decides that they want to diversify and try to like grow actual vegetables for human consumption instead of corn for ethanol, then that would mean less profits for the people selling these chemicals that corn relies on.
Exactly, and they don't. And
Okay.
so, and the federal government doesn't provide the same sort of subsidies and incentives for people to grow food without pesticides.
Wow. If
So,
only there's a way that they would, that would change things.
would
Okay, well, before we go, we have 2 minutes and 19 seconds left.
oh my gosh.
Could you feel free to pitch your books real quick? Where can people find out about your work?
Oh, great. Sure. Well, everybody can find books on Amazon now these days, right? Both my
Yeah.
books, Whitewash and the Monsanto Papers, were published by a company called Island Press, which is now owned by Princeton Press.
Okay.
But they're, Barnes and Noble, or I guess anywhere you buy books, Whitewash and the Monsanto Papers.
Yeah.
And a version of the story told in the Monsanto Papers is going to be a Netflix movie
Get out.
point
What?
in the future. So everybody,
That's
if you're really
great.
interested in that story,
Wow.
read the book and then watch the fictional version of that case on
And
Netflix.
there is a website just for your work specifically. I think I came across it, right? Like,
CareyGillam.com. Yeah, I have a website
okay.
where you can see a lot of my articles. I need to update it. I think I'm about 3 or 4 months behind them.
Okay. Okay. Well, we have 1 minute and 10 seconds left. Is there anything that I should have asked you? Anything else you think people should know about?
Given that you're putting all this out here very quickly, I think in September, it is important, I think, for people to take all these issues into hand when they decide who to vote for and how to vote,
Hmm.
in the midterm elections. And always we focus a lot on foreign policy and healthcare policy and all of these things, but like food policy, how we grow our food, what choices are being made in the farm fields, how that affects our health. It's only really started to become a platform politically, I think, because of this Make America Healthy Again movement. And I'm not, you know, I guess I'm not trumpeting that movement either. I think they all have, you know, um, people need to make up their own minds, but
Yeah.
certainly it's an issue in Iowa. Certainly, I know that the candidates are being asked about, and I think in
Yeah.
every state people running for office should really be asked about what are you going to do to make sure that the food we feed our families is not also making us sick.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Carrie. Hang out for just a second at the end after I hit stop record, but thank you so much for your time. I really
Okay, thank
appreciate
you.
it.
I'm so sorry that we had to be so short.
Oh, well, this was an action-packed short episode, so
Okay, good.
okay, I'm gonna hit stop. Okay.